Before we open the file on one of the most sophisticated operations in the history of the Institute, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We are exposing the tradecraft, the shadows, and the history that governments try to keep buried. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a briefing. Now let's go to Vienna. The year was 1979. Vienna was not just a city of opera houses, coffee, and snow-dusted imperial palaces. It was the nerve center of the Cold War, a gray zone where the unspoken truce between East and West held by a thread. It was a marketplace of secrets. On Kärntner Strasse, you could buy a micro camera from a Japanese tourist, a stolen NATO file from a desperate Hungarian, or the loyalty of a man who claimed to have principles. Ari Ben-Zvi stood near the window of a safe house in the 3rd District, watching the tram cables slice through the falling snow. He was a Katsa, a case officer for the Mossad, and he was tired. He had been running assets in Europe for 6 years, living a life of false names and cold hotel rooms. But the man he was waiting for, the man who was currently late, was the source of his exhaustion. The man's code name was the Gourmand. His real name was Ibrahim Al-Khalil. Ibrahim was a Palestinian from a prominent family in Nablus who had moved to Europe in the late 60s. He was charming, educated at the Sorbonne, and had an appetite for the finer things that bordered on the pathological. He wore Italian silk, smoked Cuban cohibas, and drank only vintage Bordeaux. He was also, on paper, one of Israel's most valuable assets inside the growing network of Palestinian militant factions operating in Europe. For 3 years, Ibrahim had provided gold. He gave Ari the locations of safe houses in Paris, the bank account numbers used to funnel money from Libya to Rome, and the travel schedules of mid-level commanders. He was expensive, demanding payments that made the accountants in Tel Aviv weep, but the intelligence was solid until it wasn't. Ari checked his watch. The second hand swept past the 12. Ibrahim was 20 minutes late. This was a power move. In the world of intelligence, punctuality is a language. Being on time means respect. Being early means anxiety. Being late means dominance. When the doorbell finally rang, it wasn't the tentative buzz of a guest, but a long, confident press. Ari smoothed his jacket, checked the Walther PPK holstered at the small of his back, and opened the door. Ibrahim swept in, bringing the cold air and the scent of expensive cologne with him. He was wearing a camel hair coat that probably cost more than Ari's annual salary. "My dear Ari," Ibrahim said, his voice booming, a smile plastering his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. "The weather is barbaric, truly barbaric. I hope you have something better than that instant mud you usually serve." "Ibrahim," Ari said, keeping his face neutral, "you're late." "Traffic, my friend. The Ringstrasse is a parking lot." Ibrahim tossed his coat onto a chair and sat down, crossing his legs. "Besides, I bring news that is worth the wait." Ari sat opposite him. He watched Ibrahim's hands. They were manicured, soft. These were not the hands of a fighter. They were the hands of a man who sold fighters. "We need to talk about the shipment in Trieste," Ari said quietly. 2 weeks prior, Ibrahim had tipped Mossad off about a shipment of small arms arriving in the Italian port of Trieste, destined for a radical cell in Germany. The Mossad had alerted Italian authorities. The Italians raided the warehouse. It was empty. Not just empty, but dusted. Clean. "Bad luck." Ibrahim shrugged, pulling a silver cigarette case from his pocket. "The schedule changed. These things happen. The wind blows. The plans shift." "The wind didn't blow, Ibrahim. The timeline was solid. Someone tipped them off." Ibrahim lit his cigarette, blowing a stream of blue smoke toward the ceiling. "Are you accusing me, Ari? After everything I've given you? The Paris accounts? The Geneva safe house?" "I'm not accusing," Ari lied. "I'm analyzing. And the analysis says the quality of the product is degrading." Ibrahim laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. "The product is fine. The market is volatile. But listen, I have something new, something big. There is a meeting happening in Cyprus next month, the Inner Circle. I can get you the names, I can get you the agenda, but..." He paused, tapping the ash from his cigarette. "But what?" "It will cost. Inflation, Ari. The price of loyalty is going up." Ari looked at the man across from him. He saw the arrogance, the greed, But deeper than that, he saw the telltale signs of a man who believed he was untouchable. Ibrahim thought he was playing a game of chess against a child. "I'll send the request to headquarters," Ari said. "Good. And Ari? Next time, get some real coffee. Maybe a little pastry. We are in Vienna after all. Let's not live like savages." As Ibrahim left, stepping back out into the snow, Ari went to the window. He watched the man get into a black Mercedes waiting at the curb. He noted the license plate, Diplomatic Corps, Eastern Bloc. Ari picked up the secure phone. He didn't dial the finance department to ask for more money. He dialed a number that routed directly to a nondescript office building north of Tel Aviv. "The bird is cooked," Ari said into the receiver. "I repeat, the bird is cooked." The recruitment of Ibrahim al-Khalil had been considered a masterstroke 3 years earlier. He was a man bridging two worlds. His family had revolutionary credentials, but Ibrahim had capitalist tastes. He was the perfect target for mice: money, ideology, coercion, ego. In Ibrahim's case, it was almost entirely money and ego. He wanted to be a player. He wanted to be the man in the room who knew more than anyone else. Mossad had fed that ego. They treated him like a prince. They deposited funds into a numbered Swiss account. They listened to his lectures on Middle Eastern politics with feigned fascination. But somewhere along the line, the dynamic shifted. The degradation of an agent is rarely sudden. It is a slow rot. It starts with small lies to cover up a lack of access. A source dries up, but the agent needs the money, so he fabricates a report. He embellishes a conversation. If the handler accepts it, the agent pushes further. But Ibrahim's rot was different. It wasn't just fabrication, it was betrayal. Ari spent the night in the safe house reviewing the Trieste file. He cross-referenced Ibrahim's movements over the last 6 months. The patterns were subtle, but they were there. Every time Ibrahim traveled to Berlin, he stayed at the Kempinski. Standard procedure for him. But the surveillance logs showed him having lunch at the Café Einstein with a man named Viktor Volkov. Volkov was listed in the Mossad database as a cultural attaché at the Soviet embassy in East Berlin. In reality, Volkov was KGB Directorate S. He ran illegals and double agents in Western Europe. The picture was becoming clear. Ibrahim wasn't just slipping, he had been turned. Or perhaps even worse, he had approached the Soviets himself. He was selling the same information to both sides. Or worse, he was feeding Mossad chicken feed, useless or misleading information, while giving the Soviets the real intelligence on Israeli operations. The empty warehouse in Trieste wasn't bad luck. It was a test. The KGB had likely orchestrated the tip through Ibrahim to see how Mossad would react, to gauge their response times and their relationship with Italian intelligence. Ibrahim had used Ari as a guinea pig for his Russian masters. The betrayal cut deep. Intelligence work is cynical, yes, but it relies on a specific kind of intimacy. A handler entrusts his life to the agent's discretion. If the agent talks, the handler disappears. Ari had met Ibrahim in open places, in cars, in hotels. If Ibrahim was talking to Volkov, then Volkov had pictures of Ari. Volkov knew Ari's cover identities. This wasn't just about lost money or bad intel anymore. This was a security breach of the highest order. Ari lit a cigarette, staring at the file. The smoke curled around the desk lamp. He remembered Ibrahim's comment about the coffee. Let's not live like savages. Ibrahim believed he was the puppet master, holding the strings of two of the world's most powerful intelligence agencies. He thought he could dance between the raindrops without getting wet. He was using Israeli money to buy Russian favor and likely using Russian protection to shield himself from Palestinian rivals. He was a triple agent, and he was laughing at them. The secure telex machine in the corner of the room chattered to life. It was the response from Tel Aviv. It was short, coded, and decisive. Authorization granted. Initiate Protocol Olympus. Clean up the mess. Protocol Olympus was internal slang. It meant the subject was to be removed from the board. But there was a catch. It couldn't look like a hit. If Ibrahim was found with a bullet in his head, the Soviets would know Mossad had made him. They would scrub their networks. The Palestinian factions would turn him into a martyr, claiming the Zionists' silenced a hero. No, Ibrahim al-Khalil had to die, but his death had to be quiet. It had to be mundane. It had to be a tragedy, not a crime. Ari looked at the dossier one last time. He focused on the section labeled Psychological Profile, Habits. Subject has a refined palate, obsessed with status symbols, weakness for luxury goods, truffles, aged cognac, high-end caviar. Ari smiled, a cold, humorless expression. Caviar. The food of czars, the food of Russians. If Ibrahim was playing bedfellows with the Russians, perhaps it was time the Russians sent him a gift. To understand why the order came down so swiftly, we must look at what happened in Beirut 3 days before the Vienna meeting. This was the event that moved Ibrahim from the problem column to the immediate threat column. Mossad had been running a surveillance network in Beirut, monitoring the transfer of heavy weaponry from Syrian stockpiles to local militias. It was a delicate operation involving 3 local assets, Lebanese Christians who were risking everything to provide visual confirmation of the convoys. Ibrahim had been asked, casually, by a different handler in Paris, if he knew anything about increased security measures in the Bekaa Valley. It was a rigorous check, a way to verify other intel. Ibrahim had said he would ask around. 48 hours later, the 3 Lebanese assets in Beirut went silent. They didn't miss a check-in. They simply vanished. Later, intelligence confirmed that their safe house had been raided by a special unit of the Syrian intelligence services. The raid was precise. They knew exactly which apartment to hit, what time the shift change was, and where the radio equipment was hidden. The only person outside the immediate operational loop who had been asked about that specific sector was Ibrahim. He hadn't just asked around. He had sold the query. He had gone to his KGB contact or his Palestinian handlers and said, "The Israelis are looking at the Bekaa Valley. They have eyes there." That betrayal cost 3 men their lives. It blinded Israel to a major weapons transfer, and it proved that Ibrahim was no longer just a greedy opportunist. He was an active vector of infection. Back in Vienna, Ari sat in the dimly lit safe house, the weight of those 3 men on his shoulders. He didn't know their names. Compartmentalization kept him ignorant of the Beirut operatives, but he felt their loss. They were soldiers in the Shadow War, just like him, and they had been sold for a stack of Deutschmarks or a favor from a Russian. The decision to eliminate Ibrahim wasn't about revenge. Revenge is emotional. Intelligence is pragmatic. Ibrahim knew too much. He knew the faces of at least 4 Katzes. He knew the financial structures of the payouts. He knew the questions Mossad was asking, which was often more revealing than the answers they received. If he was allowed to defect, or if he fully integrated into the KGB apparatus, the damage would take a decade to repair. Ari pulled out a map of Vienna. He began to trace the routes Ibrahim took, the hotels, the restaurants, the rhythmic pulse of his life. Ibrahim felt safe in Vienna. Austria was neutral ground. The unspoken rules of the Cold War generally prohibited wet work, violent operations in Vienna, to preserve it as a meeting place. Intelligence officers from the CIA, KGB, MI6, and Mossad rubbed shoulders at the Hotel Sacher. They nodded to each other. They didn't shoot each other. By breaking the rules of the game, by getting agents killed, Ibrahim had forfeited the protection of the neutral ground. But Mossad couldn't be seen breaking the truce. If they blew up Ibrahim's car on the Ringstrasse, the Austrian government would crack down. The CIA would be furious. The KGB would retaliate. The method had to be surgical, invisible. Ari picked up a pen and wrote a single word on a notepad. Beluga. He remembered a story Ibrahim had told him months ago, bragging about a dinner he attended in Moscow during a diplomatic trip. The caviar, Ari. They served it in buckets, the real stuff. Not the garbage they export to the West, the gray pearls. Creamy, nutty. A taste of heaven. Ibrahim's greed was his engine. His gluttony would be his brake. The plan began to form in Ari's mind. It required a specific prop, a tin of beluga caviar, but not just any tin. It had to look like it came from the top shelf of the Kremlin pantry. It had to look like a gift from a high-ranking Russian official, a reward for a job well done, a reward for Trieste, a reward for Beirut. Ibrahim would expect a reward. His ego demanded it. If Ari played the part of the disgruntled handler, Ibrahim would naturally pivot toward the Russians, expecting them to laud his genius. Ari would deliver the Russian gift, but the Russians wouldn't be the ones sending it. Tel Aviv, the Kiryat, the beating heart of Israel's defense establishment. The meeting to authorize the operation was held in a windowless room that smelled of stale air conditioning and strong tea. The Committee of Heads of Services, Varash, was not involved in every hit, but for a high-profile asset in Europe, the director of Mossad needed a consensus. The presentation was given by the head of the Caesarea unit, the Special Operations Division responsible for strikes outside the borders. "The subject is Ibrahim al-Khalil," the division head said, sliding a black and white photograph across the table. "Status, double agent, active threat level, critical. Compromise of the Beirut network is confirmed." The men around the table reviewed the file. There were no politicians here, only professionals, men who dealt in the currency of risk. "Why not kidnap?" one asked. "Bring him back, interrogate him, find out what he told Volkov." "Too risky," the Caesarea head replied. "He has diplomatic cover from a friendly Arab nation. If we grab him in Vienna and get caught, it's an international incident. The Austrians will lock down the station. We lose Vienna as a hub. Furthermore, Volkov has him under counter-surveillance. If he vanishes, the KGB will know we took him. So, liquidation? Yes, but it must be clean. No explosives, no bullets. We need a natural death, heart failure, stroke, something that passes a standard autopsy." The director of Mossad leaned forward. "What is the proposal?" "Operation Black Pearl," the division head said. "We exploit his relationship with the KGB. We plant a toxic agent in a luxury food item. We present it as a gift from his Russian handlers, intercepted or delivered through a cutout. He eats it in the privacy of his own home. He goes to sleep. He doesn't wake up. The toxin? A modified compound, developed at the Institute for Biological Research. It mimics a massive coronary event. It breaks down rapidly in the bloodstream. Unless the Austrian coroner is looking specifically for this exotic compound, and they won't be, it will look like a 45-year-old man with a high cholesterol diet had a heart attack." The director nodded slowly. "And the delivery vector?" "Caviar, Soviet beluga. He loves it. It fits the narrative. He thinks he's a hero to the Soviets. A gift from Moscow makes sense to him. Who delivers it?" "The case officer, Ben-Zvi. He has the relationship. He needs to play the role of the conduit, or we use an unwitting courier. Ben-Zvi suggests he can manipulate Ibrahim into taking it." There was a silence in the room. Signing a death warrant is never done lightly, contrary to what the movies suggest. It is a bureaucratic, heavy process. It requires weighing the life of one man against the potential death of many others. "He sold the Beirut team," the director said finally. "He crossed the line. He picked up a pen and signed the authorization form. Execute." In a secure laboratory south of Tel Aviv, the scientists of the Institute were working on the condiment. The requirements were strict. The toxin had to be tasteless, odorless, and colorless. It could not alter the delicate flavor of the caviar. If Ibrahim tasted anything metallic or bitter, he would spit it out. He was a connoisseur. His palate was his first line of defense. The scientists settled on a derivative of a toxin found in nature, enhanced for stability. It was a masterpiece of organic chemistry. It worked by blocking the potassium channels in the heart muscle. Once ingested, it would take approximately 2 hours to metabolize. This delay was crucial. It meant Ibrahim would finish the meal, perhaps smoke a cigar, maybe go to bed. When the effect kicked in, it would start with a tightness in the chest, shortness of breath, then a sudden catastrophic arrhythmia. The heart would simply flutter and stop. No convulsions, no foaming at the mouth, just a sudden end. The delivery system was equally important. They couldn't just stir poison into a tin. Breaking the factory seal would be obvious. The technicians sourced a vintage tin of beluga caviar. The blue tin, the rubber band seal, the Cyrillic lettering. It was authentic. Using a microscopic needle, they injected the toxin through the side of the tin, under the lip of the lid, into the eggs themselves. They sealed the microscopic puncture with a dab of industrial epoxy that matched the color of the tin perfectly. They then placed the tin in a centrifuge, spinning it gently to ensure the toxin was distributed evenly among the black pearls. It was a lethal work of art. A courier flew the tin to Munich, then took a train to Vienna. It was passed to Ari Benzvi in a crowded train station, slipped into his briefcase during a brush pass. A momentary collision between two strangers. Ari felt the weight of the tin in his bag. It was heavy. 500 grams. A king's portion. He took it back to the safe house and placed it in the small refrigerator. He stared at it. It looked so innocent. A blue tin cylinder. It promised luxury. It contained death. Now came the hard part. The theater. Ari needed a reason to give Ibrahim the caviar. If Ari, the Mossad agent, gave Ibrahim, the traitor, a gift, Ibrahim would be suspicious. Why is the Jew giving me a gift when I haven't given him good intel lately? Ari had to create a scenario where Ibrahim demanded or expected the gift. Or better yet, Ari had to pretend the gift wasn't from him at all. He decided on a narrative of intercepted luxury. He called Ibrahim. "We need to meet," Ari said. "Urgent." "I told you, Ari, I am busy. Unless you have the money for the Cyprus intel." "It's not about money, it's about Volkov." There was a pause on the line. The mention of the Russian's name grabbed Ibrahim's attention. What about him? Not on the phone. The Café Central. 1 hour. Ari arrived early. The Café Central was grand, with vaulted ceilings and the clinking of porcelain. It was loud, which was good for privacy. When Ibrahim arrived, he looked nervous. "What is this about Volkov?" Ari leaned in, lowering his voice. He looked stressed. He looked like a man who was losing control. "We intercepted a courier coming from East Berlin," Ari whispered. "A diplomatic pouch. It was heading for the Palestinian mission here, but we know it was meant for you." Ibrahim's eyes widened. What was in it? Files? Money? No. That's the strange thing. It was personal effects. And this? Ari reached into his bag and pulled out the tin of beluga. He didn't hand it over immediately. He set it on the table between them. "Caviar?" Ibrahim frowned, but his eyes locked onto the blue tin. "There was a note," Ari lied. It said, "For the gourmand, with compliments for a job well done in the South." "The South?" Ibrahim muttered. "That could mean Beirut." "Why did you intercept it?" Ibrahim asked, feigning indignation. "That is my property. We checked it for bugs," Ari said. "We x-rayed it. We thought it might be a listening device hidden inside. But it's just fish eggs. The lab gave it back to me. They wanted me to throw it away." Ari looked at the tin with disdain. "I hate the stuff. Salty slime." He pushed the tin toward Ibrahim. "If you're working with the Russians, Ibrahim, you're playing a dangerous game. They pay you in fish eggs. We pay you in Swiss francs." It was a psychological gamble. Ari was betting on Ibrahim's arrogance. By disparaging the gift, and by admitting Mossad had already screened it for tech, but implying they were too stupid to check for biologicals, he disarmed the suspicion. Ibrahim reached out and touched the cool metal of the tin. He saw the Cyrillic script, Osetra Molosol, the real deal. He smiled, a greedy, self-satisfied smile. He believed the Russians were honoring him, and he believed the Israelis were jealous, petty, and incompetent for intercepting his gift and not understanding its value. "You Israelis have no culture," Ibrahim sneered, slipping the heavy tin into his coat pocket. "You see a gesture of respect, and you check it for wires. This is why you will never understand the soul of the East." "Just be careful, Ibrahim," Ari said, sounding defeated. "Volkov eats his friends. I can handle Volkov, and I can handle you." Ibrahim stood up. "I will take this, and I will enjoy it. Consider it a down payment on the Cyprus intelligence." He walked out of the cafe. Ari watched him go. "Enjoy your meal," Ari thought. Ibrahim al-Khalil returned to his apartment in the first district. It was a spacious flat with high ceilings and parquet floors, filled with Persian rugs and Biedermeier furniture. He felt a surge of triumph. He was winning. He had the Mossad running in circles, intercepting his mail like jealous lovers. And he had the KGB sending him tribute. For the job well done in the South. Yes, the Beirut tip. He had destroyed that network, and Moscow was pleased. He took off his coat and placed the tin on the marble kitchen counter. It was cold to the touch. He decided to make an occasion of it. He was alone tonight. His mistress was in Paris, but that was better. He didn't have to share. He opened a bottle of chilled vodka, Stolichnaya. He toasted bread and cut off the crusts, buttering the triangles lightly. He chopped a hard-boiled egg and some shallots, placing them in small crystal bowls. He took the tin of beluga. He peeled off the thick rubber band that sealed the gap between lid and base. It snapped off with a satisfying elasticity. He twisted the lid. It gave a distinct pop as the vacuum seal broke. Perfect. Factory sealed. The Israelis had X-rayed it, the fools, but they hadn't opened it. He lifted the lid. The eggs were glistening, dark gray pearls, perfectly intact. The smell was oceanic, rich, and clean. He took a mother-of-pearl spoon. Metal spoons ruin the taste, and scooped a generous mound of eggs onto a piece of buttered toast. He took a bite. It was exquisite. The eggs popped against the roof of his mouth, releasing that unique buttery brine flavor that only the Caspian Sea could produce. There was no bitterness, no chemical aftertaste, just pure luxury. He ate another piece, and another. He drank the vodka. He sat in his armchair, listening to a record of Mahler. He felt like a king. He imagined the look on Ari's face, the frustration of the Israeli agent handing over the prize he couldn't understand. He finished half the tin. An hour later, he felt a slight indigestion, a heaviness in his chest. He attributed it to the rich food and the vodka. He loosened his tie. He stood up to go to the bathroom, but his legs felt strange, heavy, like they were made of lead. Too much vodka, he muttered to himself. He sat back down. The heaviness in his chest increased. It felt like a band of iron tightening around his ribs. He tried to take a deep breath, but the air wouldn't fill his lungs. Panic began to set in. He reached for the phone to call a doctor. His hand knocked the receiver off the hook, but his fingers wouldn't curl around it. His arm was numb. My heart, he thought. It's my heart. He tried to stand again, but the room tilted violently. He collapsed onto the Persian rug. The world was graying out at the edges. The music of Mahler seemed to be slowing down, dragging. He looked at the coffee table. The blue tin of caviar sat there, open, innocent. A sudden, terrifying clarity pierced through the fog of his dying brain. The gift, the Israelis, Ari. He tried to speak, to curse them, but his jaw was locked. The pain in his chest was a supernova. Then, darkness. Ibrahim al-Khalil, the gourmand, died on his living room floor, staring at the ceiling of an apartment he had bought with betrayed secrets. The body was discovered the next morning by his cleaning lady, Frau Helga. She let herself in with her key, calling out a cheerful, "Guten Morgen." She found him by the armchair. She screamed, ran to the neighbors, and the police were called. The Viennese police arrived quickly. They saw no signs of a break-in. The door was locked from the inside. The windows were secured. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no weapon. Just a middle-aged man who had enjoyed a lavish meal and succumbed to a heart attack. The medical examiner arrived an hour later. He noted the half-empty bottle of vodka, the rich food. Classic, he muttered. Rich diet, high stress, alcohol. The heart gives out. They bagged the body. They took photos of the scene. Ari Benzvi was watching from a cafe across the street. He saw the ambulance arrive. He saw the stretcher come out, covered in a white sheet. He saw the lack of urgency in the police officers. That was the sign. It was a routine death investigation, not a murder scene. The deception had held. Within 24 hours, the news reached the embassies. The Palestinian mission was in chaos. They suspected the Israelis immediately, of course, but they had no proof. Their own security people went to the apartment, after bribing a police contact, and found nothing suspicious. The KGB station in Vienna was confused. Volkov heard the news and frowned. He checked his records. He hadn't sent Ibrahim any caviar. This troubled Volkov. He knew Ibrahim was a hedonist. Had he bought it himself, or had someone else sent it? The Austrian coroner performed the autopsy. The heart showed signs of massive failure. The arteries were clogged, years of foie gras and lamb. The toxicology screen was standard. They checked for cyanide, arsenic, strychnine, and common sedatives. The test came back negative. The Institute's compound had metabolized completely into undetectable byproducts. The cause of death was ruled myocardial infarction, natural causes. The case was closed. Ari Ben-Zvi had one last task. He had to ensure that the legend of the death solidified. He met with a contact in the Austrian press, a journalist Mossad sometimes fed stories to. "Did you hear about the Palestinian diplomat?" Ari asked over a beer. "The one who died yesterday? Heart attack, right?" "Yeah," Ari said. "A shame. He was a known bon vivant. They say he was eating beluga and drinking vodka when he dropped. A good way to go, I suppose. A very Viennese death." The journalist laughed. The story appeared in the back pages of the newspaper the next day. Palestinian official dies of natural causes in luxury apartment. This public confirmation sealed the narrative. Even if the Palestinians or Russians had doubts, the public record said heart attack. To challenge it would require evidence they didn't have. Though the police called it natural, the silence of Ibrahim al-Khalil sent a shockwave through the invisible world. In Moscow, Volkov was reprimanded. His star agent had died, and the network Ibrahim had built began to crumble without his connections. The KGB suspected Mossad play, but they couldn't prove it, and they couldn't figure out how it was done. This uncertainty terrified them. If the Israelis could kill a man in a locked room without leaving a trace, who was safe? In the Palestinian camps in Lebanon and Syria, rumors swirled. Some said Ibrahim was poisoned by rivals. Some said he drank himself to death. But the smart ones, the ones who knew he was playing a double game, looked at his death and felt a chill. They realized that the long arm of the Mossad didn't always hold a gun. Sometimes it held a spoon. The message was received. You can hide behind diplomatic immunity. You can hide in neutral cities, but you cannot hide from your own vices. Ari packed his bag in the safe house. His tour in Vienna was over. It was standard procedure to rotate a katza after a noisy operation, even a quiet one like this. He looked out the window at the snow one last time. The city looked beautiful, clean, white. He thought about Ibrahim. He didn't hate the man. He pitied him. Ibrahim had thought he was the smartest man in the room, but he had forgotten that he was just a pawn on a very large board. Ari picked up his briefcase. He checked the room, clean, nothing left behind. He walked to the door, paused, and looked at the small refrigerator in the kitchenette. It was empty now. He stepped out into the cold Viennese night, headed for the airport and a flight back to the warmth of Tel Aviv. The operation was a success. The file was closed. The gourmand had eaten his last meal. And somewhere in the archives of the Institute, a new file was stamped. Operation Black Pearl, successfully concluded.